Hey, I see you here all the time. Do you mind if I buy you a drink? The woman who'd spoken sat down on the bar stool next to me. She was classically pretty, with blonde hair, soft hazel eyes, and a mischievous smile. I'd seen her here at Al's bar a few times before, but we'd never spoken before tonight. I gave her a small smile. If she was trying to pick me up, I wanted to let her down gently. I said that I appreciated the offer, but after I finished my beer, I was going home to my wife and kid. It was a white lie. Annabelle had taken our son Jacob to her sister's for the weekend, and technically, I had the whole apartment to myself. Rather than taking the hint, the woman leaned in closer. She asked if I lived nearby. Right at the end of the street, I answered without thinking. When the woman asked exactly which apartment I lived in, though, I started to get genuinely uncomfortable. I never should have let the conversation get this far, I realized. I should have turned away, paid my bill, and left. But instead, I stayed right where I was, enjoying the attention. After all, how long had it been since someone had flirted with me? How long had it been since I'd had a fun conversation with a stranger? Just chatting about something other than work, finances, or childcare. The woman introduced herself as Melody. She explained that she used to live in the same building as I did, and she was curious whether the place had changed much. Did all the kitchens still have that awful yellow linoleum on the floors? She wanted to know. I laughed. Annabelle and I had had a hell of a time pulling that stuff up after we'd bought our new apartment 4 months ago. Underneath, we had found layers of old glue, rotten wood, and a nest of hideous gray centipedes. While I regaled Melody with tales of our renovation nightmare, she ordered another cocktail, and I ordered another beer. Why not? I figured. There was still about another half hour until closing time, and the storm outside showed no signs of letting up anytime soon. When our drinks arrived, we both fell silent, like we'd just been caught sharing a secret. And we were, in a way. When I told Annabelle what I'd done over the weekend, I doubted I was going to mention how attractive Melody was, or how she kept letting her arm accidentally brush against mine. Once the bartender had left, Melody cleared her throat and asked another question. One that made me wish I'd walked away when I had the chance. Other than the bugs, has anything weird ever happened in your apartment? Like, the bad kind of weird? My stomach churned. I gripped the bar as though if I let go, I might fall off my stool. Maybe even off the earth. If Melody noticed my sudden change of attitude, though, she didn't let on. How could I possibly confess what I'd discovered to her? Or to anyone? I hadn't even been able to tell my wife. Between the baby and work, she had more than enough on her plate already. I didn't want her to worry that her husband was losing his mind on top of it all. When Annabelle, Jake, and I had moved into our new apartment 4 months ago, everything had seemed fine. Great, even. Our neighbor on one side, Reuben, was a clean, middle-aged bachelor who never made noise. Our neighbors on the other side were constantly traveling for work. Maybe, between the move and a 9-month-old baby, I had just been too exhausted to notice it at first. Or maybe it had just been biding its time, luring us in like a spider that allows its prey to entangle itself completely in the web before it strikes. It began with the hairs, I explained to Melody. These little black strands that started showing up everywhere. The couch, the shower curtain, even baby Jake's crib. They were almost like cat hairs, except longer. And we didn't have a cat. I figured that our stuff had just gotten dirty in the moving van. But no matter how much I cleaned, those long, black strands kept showing up. To help with the hair problem, And with all of baby Jake's messes, we wound up hiring a housekeeper. Her name was Katya. She was a no-nonsense Belarusian woman who had been recommended by one of Annabelle's work friends. And she could get our apartment cleaner in just a few hours than I could in a whole weekend. But then, after just 4 visits, she quit. I tried to ask what was wrong, but Katya was evasive. She practically ran out the door on her last day. And while we talked in front of the elevator, she kept looking over her shoulder, like she was afraid someone was going to come out of our apartment and drag her back inside. Nothing was wrong, Katya said. We had a lovely home and a lovely family. Such an adorable baby boy and such a playful daughter. I figured something had gotten lost in translation, because Jake was an only child. And as far as I knew, there had never been any other kids in our apartment. As the elevator doors closed, Katya shook her head. She seemed sure that I was joking. Of course there was another child, she chuckled. What about the tall, skinny girl who liked to play hide and seek? Holy shit, Melody whistled, then chugged what was left of her drink in one go. She belched, then covered her mouth with a bar napkin. Talking about all this with a judgment-free stranger felt good. Better, in fact, than I had ever imagined it could. I hadn't realized how much I needed this. How many hours had I spent gnawing on these same eerie coincidences without ever getting any closer to a solution? After Katya had left that day, I went back inside, scratching my head. Nobody else was in our apartment. I was absolutely sure of it. I mean, where could they have been hiding? Once Annabelle fell asleep that night, I got out my old camping headlamp and searched the place from top to bottom. It was an eerie feeling, exploring my own home like it was some kind of abandoned ruin. Everything felt threatening and unfamiliar, and my heart raced every time I checked under a bed or pushed a door open. By midnight, I only had 2 places left to inspect. Annabelle's bathroom and the closet in Jake's room, which had become the dumping ground for all the stuff we didn't have space for after the move. Head-high stacks of cardboard boxes, an old vacuum cleaner, clothes we hadn't worn in years. My headlamp didn't have much battery left, but I wanted to get this over with. Annabelle's clothes rustled on their hangers when I opened the door. Was it just because I had bumped them? I hope so, but there was only one way to be sure. I pushed aside those clothes, and on the other side, I found the sight I'd been dreading ever since Katya had mentioned the tall, skinny girl in our apartment. A grinning, full-moon face, wide, bloodshot eyes, tiny hands tipped with long, black claws. It was a t-shirt Annabelle had picked up at some psychedelic concert, printed with the face of a Cheshire cat. But it had scared the shit out of me. I stumbled backwards, knocked a backpack off a dresser, and woke up baby Jake. It took me almost an hour to rock him back to sleep. When I finally went to bed myself, I discovered Annabelle sitting straight up in the dark, looking confused. She wanted to know why I'd been knocking around in her bathroom all night, even though that was the one place I hadn't checked. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, one of Annabelle's antique brass table lamps, and threw the bathroom door wide open, ready to catch the intruder red-handed. All I found was a leaky shower head. I set the lamp down beside the end table with a sigh, and crawled back into bed. As I lay down, though, I felt something brush against my cheek. There were several long, dark hairs stuck to my pillow, almost like someone had been laying there just moments before. All that was 2 nights ago, I explained to Melody. The next day, things started to change in our apartment. There was the smell to the air, like dead flowers or some grandmother's perfume. The rocking chair in the corner started creaking back and forth on its own. The radio kept switching stations without anyone touching it. And then, while Annabelle and I were getting ready for bed, the faucets all started pouring water at once. When I switched them off, I found more of those stringy black hairs all over the sinks. I made a joke about someone flushing the toilet too hard upstairs, but even I didn't think it was funny. Annabelle kept presenting rational explanations for what was happening, but I could tell that she was finding it more and more difficult to convince herself. Then, this morning, Annabelle had told me she was taking Jake and going to visit her sister in Florida for the weekend. Although I wanted to believe she would be back on Monday, the truth was that I wasn't sure she would be. So your wife knows something's wrong with the place, and she just ran off and left you there? Ouch. Melody winced. That must sting. Melody had put into words exactly what I'd been feeling. Deep down, I knew that I was being unreasonable, that Annabelle also had Jake's safety to think about, and that she would never knowingly put me in danger. But none of it stopped me from feeling betrayed by her sudden departure. Especially considering what happened after she left. It started with little things. A shadow under the door, cabinets flying open or plates crashing to the floor. A whisper, barely heard, from the dark end of the hallway. Then, just for a second, I thought I saw someone peering at me from Jake's bedroom door. Someone stretched and tall, with long, spindly fingers and black hair that hung down to the floor. And they were giggling, like they wanted to play hide and seek. The only reason I had come out here tonight, I explained to Melody, was that I was afraid to be at home. It might not be so scary if we went together, Melody smirked. I choked on my beer. Part of me wanted to shout that I wasn't exaggerating or making things up. There really was something wrong in that apartment, and I had no idea what might happen overnight. But another part of me was excited by the prospect. It wasn't just that Melody was good-looking and funny. I genuinely didn't want to be alone. I had been planning to rent a hotel room, but what if the presence in my home was following me somehow? What if I woke up to the sound of a closet door creaking open in the dark of my hotel room, only to find two bulbous white eyes staring back at me? It was the stuff of nightmares, and it was what I had been thinking about while I stared into my drink. At least, until Melody showed up. I asked if she was sure. She nodded. By the time I'd staggered to my feet and grabbed my umbrella, Melody had already paid cash for our drinks. The bartender gave me an odd look on our way out the door. Or so I thought. Maybe I was just feeling guilty. After all, what would Annabelle think if she knew I was bringing a strange woman back to our apartment? And had I seriously convinced myself that I was doing this just to have some company? I could make all the excuses I wanted, but in my own mind, I knew the truth. As we walked home in the late-night rain, Melody pressed herself close against me. We only had one umbrella, but there was more to it than that. Why was Melody so eager to come back to my place? The more I thought about the things I told her, the more convinced I was that any normal girl would have gone running in the opposite direction. Which apartment did you used to live in again? I asked, more to break the tense silence than anything else. 4B, was Melody's answer. My heart skipped a beat. That was my apartment. Oh, I stammered. Every instinct was telling me to back out. There was no such thing as coincidences this big. but I had already opened the exterior door with my key fob. Melody wedged it open with her foot. "After you," she smiled. It was too late. I was committed. I couldn't go back up to that empty apartment alone, or stumble tipsily back out into the rain. At least, that was what I told myself while I summoned the elevator. Melody and I stepped inside. The movement of the yellowed floor lights suddenly seemed sinister, like they were counting down to something. I asked Melody if she had lived here for very long. "All my life," she answered, "right up until I ran away from home at 16. Knowing the reason why Melody had run away suddenly felt terribly important, but we were already standing in front of my apartment door. Melody's right foot drummed an impatient rhythm on the sticky hallway floor. I forced myself to smile as I turned the key in the lock. I pushed the door open with 2 fingers. There was no ominous squeak of hinges, no nightmarish entity waiting on the other side. The lights didn't even flicker before they came on. I found myself questioning everything I'd said to Melody, as well as my own sanity. What if I really had just imagined it all? Melody didn't laugh at the lack of paranormal activity. She just stepped inside quickly, hung up her coat, and dropped her handbag on the table like she owned the place. Her dress lifted as she gave a little twirl in the middle of the living room. She wanted to know if there was anything for a girl to drink around here, and I mumbled something about a few liquor bottles on the top shelf in the kitchen. There hadn't been a single weird occurrence since we'd arrived. No drawer slamming, no whispering voices or shadowy figures. I wondered whether the presence in my apartment was afraid of Melody, or even under her control somehow. Then again, maybe weeks and weeks of living under so much tension had just made me paranoid. My eyes drifted to Melody's handbag, laying half open on the table. While she mixed our drinks, I slipped my hand inside it and searched for some kind of ID. Amelia Harrington, read the name on Melody's driver's license. She looked about the same in her photo, except that her hair was jet black. The noises in the kitchen had stopped. Panicking, I crammed everything back into the handbag and turned around. I made it just in time. Melody came out with 2 glasses of whiskey on the rocks, sat down on the couch, and patted the cushion beside her. I took the glass she offered, but something made me hesitate before taking a sip of my drink. "All we have to do now is wait for something to happen," Melody said, rubbing her knee against mine. "I wonder how we can pass the time." I blushed, told her I was sure we could think of something, then headed for the bathroom. An idea had just occurred to me. I locked the door behind me and took out my phone. A search for Harrington, plus Runaway, plus the name of my apartment building, brought back a chilling result. Harrington Runaway sought in slangs. Missing girl found, but questions persist. Harrington cleared in controversial trial. I didn't have time to fully read the articles, but skimming them revealed more disturbing details. Apparently, Melody's, or Amelia's, father, mother, and younger sister had been murdered the night she ran away. She had been the top suspect, but was released due to lack of evidence. Even more unsettling was the date of the killings, September 5th. Today's date. A sudden motion in the corner of my eye made me look up. The bathroom doorknob was turning, slowly and silently, like whoever was opening it didn't want to be discovered. With a sick knot in my stomach, I tried another search. The name of my apartment building, plus the date, September 5th. The pattern wasn't obvious, but it was there for all to see. A divorced attorney allegedly hung himself in the apartment 4 years to the day of the Harringtons' murder. 4 more years passed before a 95-year-old woman died in her sleep the same night. After another 4 years, the couple renting apartment 4B disappeared without a trace. 4 years after that was tonight. I glanced up again. There was one other thing in the bathroom that felt off to me. The shower curtain was closed. But after I'd washed off that morning, I'd left it open. Hadn't I? And maybe it was just the air moving from room to room, but was the curtain moving? Almost reluctantly, I reached out to pull it aside. The shower curtain flew open. The dark-haired young girl was covered with black but bloodless knife wounds. I'm not sure what she screamed when she turned and lowered her hands from her wide-eyed face, but I think it might have been, "Run!" The presence in my apartment hadn't been trying to harm me. It had been trying to warn me. Now that I knew the truth, it didn't have to tell me twice. As I charged out the door and into the lightless bedroom, I felt something hair-thin and razor-sharp slide around my neck. Piano wire. I barely had time to think the words before it tightened, slicing into my windpipe. The pain was indescribable. A weight pulled me over backwards. Melody's limbs were wrapped around me, but not quite in the way I'd been fantasizing about earlier. My legs and arms flopped uselessly on the floor. I'd had a few drinks too many, and she was a professional. She'd done this or something like it many times before. As my vision blurred, I wondered about the other occupants of 4B. Had Melody seduced the divorced attorney as well? Had she gotten the elderly woman to open her door by claiming to be a new neighbor with a plate of cookies? Maybe she had told the young renters that she was hurt and needed help. The presence in the apartment might be able to rattle doors and make lights flicker, but it couldn't fight off a killer. I was never going to see my wife and child again. I tried to scream, to plead with Melody to let me go, but the only sound I could make was a sort of sick gurgle. One of my kicking feet collided with the bed. Pain shot up my leg, but if I was this close to the wall, I stood a chance of reaching the lamp I'd set on the floor the night before. I pawed blindly until I felt the cord, then pulled. With the lamp in my hands, I swung backwards with all my might. Melody grunted. The blow wasn't enough to make her let go, but her grip loosened enough for me to slide 3 fingers between my neck and the wire. I took another swing with the lamp, missed, and felt it slip from my grasp. The light bulb shattered, and Melody pulled the wire taut for a second time. Even in the pitch dark, I thought I could see the rolled-back whites of her eyes. A shard of light bulb cut into my arm. I grabbed it and slashed at Melody's face. Howling like an animal, she let me go. It was my chance. Maybe my only chance. But the lack of oxygen had taken its toll. I just couldn't seem to get enough air into my lungs. The pitch-black room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. There was no way I could outrun a killer like this. I kept lurching forward until I reached the hallway. I couldn't understand it. Why wasn't Melody hunting me down? I looked back. In the faint light that reached the bedroom from the hallway, I was sure I saw 8 pairs of grayish hands holding her back. I pulled myself along the wall until I was free of the apartment, then flung myself against my neighbor Ruben's door. I pounded, rang the bell, and screamed as loud as my wounded throat would allow. But I could already hear Melody in the hallway behind me. It was too late at night. Ruben was probably asleep. Even if he wasn't, he probably wouldn't answer. I had only spoken to Ruben 4 times since we'd moved in. All I knew about him was that he was a buff, light-skinned guy with a gray buzz cut who woke up early to get the paper. I was pretty sure he couldn't get around without his wheelchair, but that didn't stop him from spending most of the day outside his apartment. Melody's running footsteps were closing in. I shut my eyes. I heard a shotgun racking on the other side of Ruben's door. He must have hit a button that made it swing open automatically, because suddenly, he was there, staring down Melody with a 12-gauge in his lap. I could hear a dispatch operator talking in the background. He'd already called the police. Melody locked eyes with Ruben and backed away slowly. Neither of them blinked until she bolted down the emergency exit stairs. Later, while the paramedics tended to my injuries, Ruben explained why he hadn't fired. Both Melody and I had been wild-eyed and filthy with blood and grime. It had been impossible to tell who was the aggressor and who was the victim. Besides, Ruben was a disabled veteran, and he had promised himself to never again discharge a weapon unless a life was in danger. On one hand, he had saved my life. On the other, Melody, or Amelia, was still out there. Unless she's caught, I have no doubt that she'll be back. 4 years from now, on September 5th. I called Annabelle and confessed everything. After a couple hard talks, we decided to sell the apartment, even if it meant taking a loss. I plan to warn the new owners, but I'm not sure if they'll believe me. I mean, would you?
Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.